Howdy, my name is Colonel Jaron Roux. I'm the Vice Wing Commander here at Al Dhafra Air Base, UAE.
Colonel Jaron Roux is a C-17 pilot in the United States Air Force. So whether he is loading up people for the battlefield or equipment for the battlefield, one thing remains in the forefront of his mind, and that is safety and ensuring that he is connected with the people that he has the privilege of leading. And on this episode of Mentorship Moment, we're going to be talking about his journey in becoming an Air Force pilot. I am a captain in the United States Air Force. I am an air battle manager, and I created a platform where civilian and military members can connect with the next generation of leaders. I understand the importance of mentorship because it changed my life. And I want to make sure that everybody gets that opportunity. So, without further ado, welcome to Mentorship Moment. What's going on, everybody? Russell Lewis here, and I'm with Colonel Jaron Roux, a.k.a. GQ, a.k.a. J. Roux, a.k.a. BQN basketball at 3 a.m. in the morning.
What's going on? What's going up to everybody out there listening? It's it's an honor and pleasure to dial in from Al Dhafra, UAE, representing the 380th AEW. Yay, for a little bit, but yeah. So just happy to dial in and looking forward to the conversation. Hashtag stay COVID free.
We just had a real quick discussion about you playing basketball and beating some young cats at 3 in the morning. What's up with that?
Yeah, so, right, wrong, or indifferent. I spend a lot of time out in the smoke pit. To me, it reminds me of the hood, the kind of the grimy place where don't nobody really like leadership, don't really like to kick it there. But that's where I go and I connect with airmen. I'm all over the place, but I do spend some time there. So last Friday night, couple cats, they have been drinking, having a good time. They was in the smoke pit. And they said, "Hey, sir, we hear you nice on the basketball court." And I said, I try to do my thing, whatever. And then one, I was like, well, let's get that one-on-one. I was like, well, let's get it. And then we couldn't decide on the time. Then his partner rolled up. He's like, well, me and my partner, we better at 2-on-2. I was like, okay, well, let's get it. And I was like, they was like, who's your partner? I was like, it don't matter. You pick somebody. So the next cat that walked by, they picked him. And I was like, okay, let's go when y'all ready. And they couldn't decide on the time. So I got frustrated. And I was like, well, look. It's 2:45 in the morning. Let's get it right now. And they was like, well, sir, we've been drinking and smoking. I was like, yep, I've been drinking and smoking too. So everybody on the same. So we went out there 3 o'clock in the morning, hooped it up, beat them cats in back-to-back games. First one was 15-2 and then 15-5. And so, we had to shut them young bloods up. But, it was fun, and it was just a way to connect with some airmen. And obviously some other folks came in and filmed it and stuff like that. But it was a good time. Good time.
And it is so important as a leader to be able to connect. Having that ability is so crucial to leadership. I think that comes from your upbringing. You grew up in Englewood, California. How was that journey, sir?
Yeah, no doubt. So grew up in Englewood, California. We're talking, right? I'm born in 77. So we're talking early 80s, where I grew up, raised by my grandmother and grandfather. And, this was when Bloods and Crips was riding. Essays and cholos was no joke, and so that was the thing. And we stayed in Englewood until I got to the 6th grade, and my grandparents deliberately moved out of Englewood to put to a place that didn't have as much. I had a cousin that was murdered as in gang violence, drive-by shooting. Another cousin that was murdered, part of a drug deal gone bad, and so they just really didn't want that life for me. But it was around, it was just around. So I never had the heart for that, you know what I'm saying? But I was always savvy. As always, always kicked it, always knew cats in the family who was Bloods, cats in the family who was Crips. And so, that's a part of who I am. Early on, I knew that life wasn't for me. And only by God's grace, and some really, really dedicated grandparents who sacrificed a lot, to give me opportunity, was I able to escape that, But yeah, so we moved out. I was able to go to really good schools, get into the academy, and then get into the Air Force and kind of do the thing from there. But it's only by God's grace. Lots of friends who passed away, been shot, murdered, family members, and it could have been me, but, just really blessed to have avoided that.
And man, it's so easy to become a product of your environment. I can speak on that firsthand, but I don't even think I have to with you because you know how it is. So how is that transition from Englewood, California? You are just surrounded by gangs, violence, drugs, all of this stuff, to the United States Air Force Academy. How was that transition? Because that's night and day, literally.
I think my family, we weren't a military family. I had a couple of folks, an uncle that served in Vietnam, and another, my grandfather was drafted in World War II, but not real long-term longevity service and that. And so when it was time for me to go to the academy, I was a ball player. I was going to USAFA to hoop, right? I wanted to be a Division I basketball player, although I wasn't very good, but that's what I thought I was going there to do. And so when I got there, I was still me. I was still very much in tune with what was going on back home. You guys might remember Rodney King beatings. I've heard about that. That was a thing. The OJ run. Those were things that as I was entering the academy were kind of on the forefront of the news and dominating things from my perspective. The transition was, I think, not as hard as I thought because my grandparents ran a really disciplined household, right? So putting on a uniform, following rules and all that stuff, that was no problem. I think when it came time to, really relate to people as far as outside of military, just kind of in the social world, there was definitely some learning because people that had no clue about what I'd been through, and they would make fun of or make light of, oh, it's not really that real or this or that. And you're like, nah, man, like people get shot. It happens. And so, that was an education on both sides, how people just don't know.
It's so important to have those conversations because until you build a rapport and a relationship with people, you can't even break that down and allow that connection to manifest into other people. So we have to be willing to have those conversations. But let's change gears for a second.
Okay.
Now, you went to the United States Air Force Academy. Then you went to an even more unique environment, which is the United States Air Force pilot training. How were you able to make it through that environment?
When I went to pilot training out of USAFA, pretty much all the minority, kind of African-American, had some Filipinos, all of us who were going to go to pilot training, we really talked about it and we wanted to cluster up. So we all picked to go to pilot training in Columbus. So over the course of a year, there was probably easily 15 to 20 of us that went through, right? And 15, so you think about it, each year pilot training, pilot training next is kind of flipping the game. But back then there were 15 classes, pilot training classes throughout a fiscal year. So those of us that plan to go to the same base, and then you throw in folks that was coming from ROTC and OTS, you pretty much had minorities, and in my case, some black folks in each class. In my particular class where we started out, it started out with like 7 of us in the same class. So 7 out of 31 is mind-blowing for a UPT class, right? And so while, the culture was definitely different, again, at work, because you're learning a skill that none of us really had any background exposure to upon getting there. After work, the social aspect was off the chain because we was out in Columbus. We was headed to Mississippi State. He was a groomsman at my wedding. He didn't go to the academy. His name is Kareem Haskett. He's Lieutenant Colonel flying RPAs in the reserves out of Nellis now. Man, he went to University of Georgia. He went to college. He was a Kappa, or he is a Kappa. So he would take us and show us kind of how to let our hair down and have a good time. And it really helped us all make it through that year of pilot training. But I will tell you the structure and the culture of pilot training was really something that took a big adjustment. I'm a firm believer. Flying airplanes ain't hard. It's not. Now, you may not be able to, grasp flying a fighter and moving at 500 knots or whatever, but I could teach you to fly the C-17. I could teach you to fly any crew airplane, and I believe anybody can make it through. It is just the way the U.S. Air Force curriculum had been put together and the timelines that they would try to adhere to that weeded a lot of people out. And I think where we've come to with pilot training next and how we are changing pilot training based on people's learning styles is proven that our old way of method wasn't necessarily the best way to train pilots. It was a way, and you can't really argue with our results, but it's not the best way because we're improving on that now.
I have had the absolute pleasure of watching your Air Force journey from a backseat perspective, right? I can remember watching Major J. Roux at the time And just seeing you develop and grow and grind and lead has really been amazing. And if I can put it into one word, I would do just that. I would say it's been amazing, sir. You are preparing to take command of a wing. But what I want to ask you is, how has your previous command experience prepared you for this new challenge, which is becoming a wing commander?
So I will tell you that it's not just your command experiences. My time as a squadron commander was fantastic. And most flyers, most aviators, right, they want to command a flying squadron, right? You grow up in a flying squadron, you want to command a flying squadron. And I didn't get a chance to command a flying squadron. And I was a little salty a little bit, in the beginning. But I ended up getting an OSS, an Operations Support Squadron. And for those not familiar, an OSS is made up of kind of all the cats and dogs that do all the support of the flying mission generally at a wing. And there's some other variations of OSSs based on the wing mission, but I'm talking primarily at a flying wing. I had people who are in charge of weather, intel, airfield management, airfield operations, air traffic control, ComSec. Don't nobody ever want to be in charge of ComSec. You know what I'm saying? Like, that was us. Aircrew flight equipment, where we made sure helmets, parachutes, NVGs, things like that, were ready. Current operations, so we were the schedulers for the wing. There wasn't really, my squadron was about 296 people, civilian, enlisted officers, some contractors, but our job was not flying the schedule, right? And so, one, I learned a lot about what it means to lead a diverse population from that, what it means to lead civilians. I'll tell you, one of my favorite books when I talk to people and they ask me about, hey, I'm going into command, what should I read? It's a book called The First 90 Days by Michael Watkins, right? And so he's a Harvard business, school professor, and he writes this book. And I think it's very applicable for anybody taking over an organization, and especially for us as military professionals. It's not a Clausewitz, Sun Tzu military type thing. It's a civilian perspective, that just a different take on how you should run an organization or what you should do in the beginning. That experience for sure helped shape my experience. After that, I went and worked talent management at Air Mobility Command, right? So trying to help develop a bench of officers that would continue to grow on and be senior leaders. So I think that has been very instrumental, because it's taught me how we develop officers, what the system is, and it's evolved, right? We've now switched to the 6 different developmental categories. And so as that work was happening, I had a chance to be up front and center and learning about that. And now a lot of the tools that are out were kind of being developed in that time, whether it's Talent Marketplace, My Vector, things like that. After that, I went and spent a year with a Fortune 500 company. Some folks have heard me talk about this experience before, right? So I started off wearing a suit. Then I found out I could wear my Air Force One, some jeans and a hoodie. So that's my new uniform, pretty much for a year. Spending some time with a company, learning a civilian perspective from a successful company, how they make money, how they develop talent, how they run a business, financials, the whole 9 yards. And then my capstone experience has been the one that I've had here as the vice wing commander in the 380th. Nobody ever really wants to be a vice. When you become an 06, your first command, you want to be a group commander, right? Kind of like me wanting to be a flying squadron commander. I had the opportunity to be a vice, and you want to talk about learning at its best. I'm at a wing, with about 3,500 folks that's in the AOR on the forefront, probably the most diverse wing in the Air Force, I would say, for sure, on a combat front, from the standpoint that, we've have everything this year. The different platforms have been here, from a control and reporting center to F-35s, F-15Es, F-15Cs, F-16s, EC-130s, U-2s, E-3s, EQ-4s, RQ-4s, and the KC-10, right? And so all these different platforms that we support and launch operations out of coming out of this base, and so I've had an opportunity to see all those mission sets and be at the forefront of applying combat power. And it's during a time where we had heightened tensions with Iran, right? So, we like to say we had a couple close calls, right, with them. And to be on the brink of combat operations, I mean, we execute combat sorties, but we never really worry about the repercussions, right? The Taliban and ISIS, they do some damage, but as far as being on a base deployed, not too much. I mean, I get it. If you're in a FOB in Afghanistan, kind of different sort of thing. But close calls with Iran caused us to change and really reevaluate and look at some things and how we're postured for that. And so extremely, I would say, educational and valuable experience for me to watch and help my one-star boss navigate all that. Not to mention, we've dealt with the COVID global pandemic, right? And so, it's crazy because here, dealing with that pandemic, it is very different than in the States, right? So I talk back to the family and they're isolated, making sure they only go and do certain things. But here, we still have to produce combat power every single day. And so COVID can't stop you, and so just the evolution of dealing with a brand new pandemic, from how much we thought we knew in the beginning, or how we thought the disease would affect, or the virus would affect our operations here, to what we've learned over time, has been vastly different. And the last 2 to 3 months has been extremely educational and enlightening and challenging. You learn about people in adversity. You learn about leadership once people are going through adversity. And it's one thing to be like, oh, I miss my family back home. That's that. But, you put it to people and they got to deal with something that they don't necessarily know a lot about. They have to think, they have to learn, they have to educate themselves, and that's all a part of being a good leader. And then you got to apply it, and the rules may not work, right? The established rules and regulations, they just may not work. I'll give one other short vignette that I thought of, and this is just kind of illustrating how, as leaders, we need to think about different perspectives, right? And so one of the things that's always a contentious conversation is who's going to get medals while you're deployed. Who gets a medal and what level of medal that they get, right? And so, I had a chance to engage with some leaders here and to kind of talk about that and just share some perspective. And one perspective that I shared or offered was something that is very different from the norm, which is, when have we ever asked airmen to perform in the environment that we're in right now, which is a close to peer adversary that could reach out and touch us for real, on the backs of this global pandemic, to which the global pandemic caused us to have a stop movement. So where people thought they were only going to deploy for 6 months, now they're being extended into month 7, 8, and potentially 9. And so that's a different environment to operate in, right? That's just us here. But now let's talk about, right, and we want to talk about being resilient and how important it is for resiliency. But think about the mental strain that what I just described puts on each individual airman, on top of what they're dealing with their family members, loved ones back home, right? While we're over here fighting the war and concentrating on combat operations, people's families, friends, and loved ones are standing in line to get toilet paper, can no longer go to the grocery store and just get everything you need. You're limited to 22 items. You got to go get a mask. Oh, masks aren't in supply, right? And all the midst of the media hype and all the information that is being inundated about the COVID virus, right? And there's always going to be a spin to it. There's a political spin to it. There's people that have agendas to advance whatever cause they're doing. And then there's the scientific ground truth. People are often left to find that out for themselves. And so I just offered that the environment that we're in today is vastly different than what any stupid decorations regulation was written in mind, right? Like, people didn't expect us to deploy and be in these type of conditions. And while it's not a World War I or II scenario where people are dying by the thousands from bombs and bullets, it is a very different mental anguish, stress on the force that, in my opinion, can be just as powerful and damaging. So
you said it perfect in terms of perspective. A lot of people aren't thinking about that. We're just going to give you this achievement medal, or we're just going to give you this commendation medal, and we're going to holler at you.
Or not give you anything, right? And be like, yeah, you did your job.
Period.
Period, right? And people say, well, no, it is your job to deploy. No doubt. We raise our hands to serve, and we will serve wherever needed. But, man, think about the conditions in which we're asking people to serve. And here's the other thing. If it's not your, we're talking medals, but if it's not your thing to give someone an individual medal, then as a leader, why don't you write a unit award and let your people know, like, hey, listen, not everybody, but as a unit, this is what we've achieved. I plan on, submitting us for this, so we all walk away with something.
So I want to switch things up just a little bit and ask you
Okay.
2 questions kind of wrapped up in one. So those 2 questions are, as a brand new wing commander, what are you planning to give your people that you lead? But also, what are you expecting from your people that you're going to lead?
I've kind of decided my motto. I may have to change the words a little bit. And I heard it in a sermon. So shout out to my good friend, Pastor Jesse Radford. And he preached a sermon that talked about excellence. God wants us to be excellent, right? So I turned that into my squadron motto, which is excellence as a standard and not an option, right? I'm also a Raiders fan. So, commitment to excellence, right? So I loved it. It resonated with me on all levels. And this notion of excellence is defined as doing the very best at the level that you're on. So if you are a brand new co-pilot, I don't need you to be a fantastic instructor pilot. I need you to be the very best co-pilot that you can be. And once you get to excellence as a co-pilot, guess what? We're going to make you an aircraft commander, right? And then once you're a great aircraft commander, then we're going to make you an instructor pilot. Then I just need you to do that, right? And so excellence is just doing the very best on the level that you're on. If you're a 3 level, master that. Be excellent at a 3 level, because then we're going to make you a 5 level, right? And so on and so forth. What I expect from people is to do the very best on the level that they're on. And guess what? This notion of excellence is not just in professional at work. Be an excellent friend, neighbor, husband, wife, sister, brother, mom, dad, whatever. Because when you set a pattern of excellence, right, it breeds over into other aspects of your life. Fitness, right? You just care about it. How you look. People, out here, man, deployed, these young brothers don't like to get haircuts sometime, right? And I'm like, do you think that's cute? Do you think you really look good? Do you think you're putting forth your best self? And they're like, oh, sir, well, I'm deployed, but I don't really care, whatever. I'm like, okay, why don't you put forth your best self all the time? And then you just create a habit of being your best all the time. That is what I will expect. This notion of excellence kind of in every aspect that they do, and excellence being defined as being just doing the very best you can on the level that you're on. What I expect to give them going into it, so I'm very fortunate to go to a wing that'll be smaller. It only has 2 groups, an ops group and a maintenance group, right? Flying the C-17 and being focused. But my vision for going in is to create a culture of inclusion that allows everybody to be their very best. This will be interesting. A teaser, right? So if any of my future folks that'll work for me or watching this or will ever see it, one of my first meetings with the squadron commanders, I'm going to ask to see the records of who they think are the bottom 10 people in their squadron. I don't need to know about the best, because you're always going to try to put those in front of leadership and make sure they shine. But I want to know who your bottom 10 are, and then what are you doing as a leader so they're not the bottom 10? I feel like that conversation is going to tell me more about my squadron commander's leadership than anything else that we have, than any other that we have. Because if you can tell me you have a plan to make the worst your best, then you are thinking across the full spectrum of your unit. This idea of inclusion, and I'm fortunate because I'm going into a wing where they are crushing the mission every day. So I don't need to change anything about that. If I could make people come to work and feel like they belong, feel comfortable to allow their creativity to flow, to allow their ideas to flow, feel comfortable enough that they want to take pride and improve the unit, man, the mission is only going to get that much better, right? And so that's where I'm looking to come in and focus my attention on culture. I'll tell you, I would be remiss not to acknowledge I have hired a fantastic command chief, Chief Master Sergeant Charmaine Kelly. And I'm going to tell you, I can't wait for her to get in there and help me realize kind of this vision. And she's going to be fantastic. I'm looking forward to, getting in there and really doing that. But when you ask what I expect from people, it is just kind of this excellence as a standard. And what I plan to give back is create a culture of inclusion to where they feel valued each and every day they come to perform their job.
I want to thank you for spending time with me, sir. I can only imagine what you're going through during this time of crisis, not only on the deployed front, but the family, just jobbing it every day, the stress of being deployed and away from family. I really appreciate you taking time out of your day, your only off day every week. And it's barely an off day because you're still working. I appreciate it, man.
No, man, I appreciate you and I appreciate the time. And I just encourage you and everybody else, you know, that's out there connecting with people virtually, you know, mentoring, developing, network, all that stuff is great. And we need it. Man, I appreciate you and I appreciate the time.
Sir, do you have any last words for these amazing people on right now?
I think right now is one of those what they call, you know, just a pivotal point in our Air Force history. We're getting ready to get a new chief of staff. The global environment has changed tremendously. I just read last week, American or United Airlines just laid off 40,000 people. So this pilot retention problem that we was worried about, the universe may have corrected itself. We shall see. Unemployment rate was way down. Now it's way back up again, right? So that means people like us who get that steady paycheck, that becomes, you know, an attractive career field for people. So for those of us that are in and are serving, right, that means it is more important than ever. The reset in leadership and culture is now. We get a chance to groom and grow the next generation of Air Force members in the way that we feel like it needs to be. And for me personally, I just want to encourage each and everybody to connect, to, you know, get to know your airmen. And I'm not talking about just know them by name, but I'm talking about truly get to know them, take an interest in them, and lean in and do it. Because my opinion, that connection is what people want. We are definitely physical distancing in the time of COVID, right? But we are not physically disconnecting. We are not socially disconnecting. We need to be leaning in more, taking that leadership to the next level. And it's going to stretch some of us, you know, especially those of us that got to figure out this technology. But this is going to be the way of the future. So I just appreciate you guys, and thanks for all you guys do, and appreciate you.
Everybody watching, thank you for tuning in. Sir, again, I appreciate you, and we'll catch you all next time.